Okay, good day, people. Thought I would follow up on the video from yesterday talking about paradoxes and see if I can't try to address some of the origin of those paradoxes. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that Linda Elson book, but see if I can't just, as quickly as I can, lay out the importance of Charles Sanders Peirce's work on index, icon, and symbol. And I guess along the way, I'm going to also try to comparatively critique Saussure. Now, Saussure, I think, is very well known for his signifier-signified pair. And again, so there's the sign, and the sign for him has this signifier-signified, where the signifier is roughly something like the sound image, and then the signified is roughly the concept or the idea unit that is accompanies that sound image, and then the referent, I guess, is a third element there that it's somewhat problematic in Saussure. And I've said before that I think people who have come through Jakobson and come through Peirce, they don't encounter any of those problems, and this is why the distinction between index, icon, and symbol is so important. Okay, so I think the simplest way to cut at what's wrong with Saussure's argument, and this would be, you can find it in the work of Jakobson, but it's that for Saussure, there's fundamentally an arbitrary relationship between the signifier and the signified. That is, the sound image and the mental concept do not have a motivated or a necessary relationship. It's based upon convention. And he wants to make sure here also that we're not confusing the signified with the referent. And as much as that's helpful, I don't think he's very successful, at least in some areas. It does get a little sticky when we start to move towards certain kinds of words and certain kinds of concepts. Now, the simplest way to problematize the signifier-signified distinction and its claim to arbitrariness is you look to structural elements within languages that do seem to have a consistent bearing upon the signified. And one of the most common is the structural element where added units within the signifier, within the signified express an added unit to that concept. And so some of the simplest examples would be the way that if you have the word high and then you go high, higher, highest, that the concept of high, higher, and highest actually does move along with that. That is, the highest concept is the longest of those expressions, and the sound image, its size and its shape, I guess we'll say the length of it, is somehow related to the size or the length of the concept. I mean, we can do the same thing with big, bigger, biggest. And, biggest is both the longest, and it's the concept of bigger is I guess references, again, in the concept, we're referring to something that is larger than something that's big. And so again, large, larger, largest. I mean, there's lots of different ways that the sound image and the idea unit are more structurally motivated and related than Saussure was making it seem. He was making it seem like it was all just arbitrary. Okay. My guess is that was very technical. And okay, hopefully that wasn't too bad. The point about index, icon, symbol, though, is that if you come through that language, you don't encounter any of those problems, and you're able to create a language which can tackle some of these paradoxes that Do in the Morning was concerned with, and that I would just talked about in the last video. Okay, so the way to talk about index, icon, symbol. The point is that every spoken word has all three elements. It has all three elements. That is, the spoken word can be examined as a symbol, and I think that's roughly what Saussure was doing, but it also can be examined as an icon or as an index. Now, arguably, all of the world, all of reality, is a set of ongoing signs. And it's important to remember that Peirce was a chemist. He was very familiar with chemistry and with the different kinds of bonding relations that happen at the inorganic level. And so when we're talking about an index is probably the base ground level kind of sign. It's a sign that's symptomatic of given relation states, and it has factical contiguity as its basis. Now, in uh, in the Playing with Bateson piece, which I'll put a link down to, and I've done a lot of work on Bateson, and so Bateson was in the zoo and he watches monkeys play nipping with one another, and he says the nip means the bite, but it doesn't mean what the bite would mean. I think he's sort of talking about organismal play frame, and as that emerged in evolutionary biology, right? I mean, the degree to which mammals have accumulated the capacity to play through metacommunicative framing. That's what he would say. Now, so the bite, the actual bite of the organism is a kind of index. That is, it's continuous and contiguous with all other motions, and it has a value, but the value that it has is symptomatic of the actual relation states that the organisms are in. When we move to the nip it's like a metonymic extension. It means the bite, but doesn't mean what the bite would mean. And notice that the nip has a physical resemblance or a similarity to the bite. That is, it kind of looks like the bite. And to that extent, yeah, the nip is actually an icon of the bite. Now, the words that we use in English, bite and nip, these are symbols that are arbitrarily related to their concepts, and then we have this sort of referent there once we have the concept of bites and nips. But if you look at those sort of along that level, you have the actual bite, which is an index. It's an index of the ongoing relation states. It's based on factical contiguity. Then you have the icon, where the nip looks like the bite, and the icon is based upon resemblance or similarity. Then by the time you get to the symbol, it's something like an arbitrary relation there. It's based upon convention. Okay, so part of the deal there is that you have the entire world itself is shot through with various kinds of signs, and the evolutionary development, it does seem to be that there is indexicality all through the physical world, and then an emergent property out of that is iconicity. That is, a new order of kinds of signing goes on when the sign can mean, instead of by factual contiguity, the sign can now mean by similarity, by feigning to be something else, by appearing to look like something else, to sound like something else. And then ultimately you get it all the way to the arbitrary level of human language use, where we want to see that human language use does, it's predominantly characterized by the symbol, but we don't ever really get rid of iconicity and even indexicality. And this is where paradoxes come in. Okay, so any word at all has an index. And when I say that, I mean there has to be a certain speaker who utters that word. And they have to have a certain person at a certain location with a certain rate and a certain pitch and a certain volume. All of those are actually indices. Yeah, they're operating at an indexical level, and they're based upon those kinds of factual contiguities that allow us to tell, who's speaking, and from what direction were they talking. I mean, those are, again, they're basic elements of the sign. The next element would be the icon, and notice here that even though as we're speaking, the volume, the rate, and the pitch, and the tone, all of those have indexical character, the iconic character comes from the words we use and the fact that poetry is possible. See, poetry is possible in language because words rhyme with other words, and that is their iconic level of register, right? As we're speaking, we can hear the words, and to the extent that you can hear and then imagine a word that rhymes with that word, you're dealing with that word in terms of its iconicity. And then we move all the way up into the arbitrary level of, showing how different languages have different sound images for different ideas, and then they use those for different reference. And again, the point would be there that we do have symbols based upon convention, but even those conventions, they don't ever fully remove themselves from the indexical or the iconic level. Now, again, so as people are speaking, we sometimes say, well, words are arbitrary. Well, they're kind of arbitrary, but they're also, many of them, the referent or even the concept, it does have some indexical value. So take the word I, or the word here, or the word now, or the word this. So I, here, now, this. Those words, even though there is a sense, right, I think we understand, there is a sense in which the word has a kind of arbitrariness that I think Saussure was talking about. That is, the sign has a sound image and then the ideational aspect or the concept aspect, and those are, quotes, arbitrary. There's another sense in which we really don't have a notion of what the concept is for those without the referent. We can't really separate the concept from the referent there, and the referent in those cases is more dependent upon the indexical than we would realize. So, if I say this as opposed to this as opposed to this, now I use the same word but different reference came in, and to the extent that we can allow different reference, well, then this actually has a different kind of concept. That is, the concept is maintaining an openness to new thises that I haven't yet identified. I mean, this basically means that which I'm holding in my hand. Now, see, even there, my has sort of a funny, okay, so we're starting to get to the point here that when we speak, part of the problem is that people think all of the words are occurring at the same level. It's like sort of like when you look at a sentence written on a page, it's like they're all at the same level, but the problem is that language is actually interlocking levels of abstraction. And so when you interlock levels of abstraction, when you combine an index with a symbol, you can create oscillating levels which end up producing paradoxes. This is why I am lying or this is a lie becomes possible. That is, try to create those paradoxes without the indexical words. See, if I say, the statement is a lie, we don't know, right? The statement is a lie. Well, which statement? But if I say this statement, see, this locks the reference back to the statement and creates a kind of paradox where the utterance is at one level and then the words used to convey it are actually at a different level. The word not is one of the most problematic words. I mean, the word not is it's a shifter, and it is at a meta level. It changes the level of that to which it negates. That is, if you say something and then you include a not in there, the not actually changes, again, the level of abstraction. The not is at a higher level of abstraction than that which is negated by the not. And those problems, right, they introduce all kinds of paradoxes in language. So I think there are paradoxes that we can understand better how they operate. And we can say, look, what's happening here is that you take a statement like, and notice here, in the barber case, okay, the most famous case of the barber, and this was Russell's, attempt to lay out theories of logical typing, where, there's a certain world where there's one and only one barber who shaves all and only those who don't shave themselves. See, the all and the only are critical in the logic there, but the do not is critical for creating the paradox. Yeah, the not really is crucial in that case, because the not allows for the shifting level of analysis that then we oscillate between the different, the code that's there, which again we can analyze, and then at one level, and then the proposition conveyed by the code, which is actually given at a different level. Okay, the last thing I'm going to say about index, icon, and symbol is, if you want to learn more about index, icon, symbol, what I would recommend that you do is first think of the world of forensic science. The world of forensic science is by and large the world of the indexical. People who are experts at understanding how indexicals operate, or the indexical level of discourse in human interaction, they're the person who goes in and they look for evidential symptomatic signs, the kinds of signs that get produced independent of intention and are left by as a kind of evidence of who was actually where when. These kind of actual physical contiguity issues, these are so crucial to the realm of indexical. It's sort of like, a non-smoking sign is perhaps arbitrary, but where you put the smoking sign, the no smoking sign, is not. Right? So again, the location of things being ruffled or out of place, or just those symptomatic signs that are left behind as evidential, that's the indexical. The iconic, this would be, this is the realm of expertise of the criminal, who has to make things look a certain way, and they're playing with appearances. In the same way that a word rhymes with other words, and that's what makes poetry possible, the criminal leaves behind aspects in the world that make it look as if certain events unfolded in certain ways. And the better the person is, the more that those icons approximate the kind of indices that would have been left behind. And so the master strategist is always aware that there will be people looking after for the indexical evidence, and they're trying to simulate it through various forms of iconicity. And then words, are the symbolic level, those are what we use here now to disambiguate all that. I mean, we're able to shake all that out and to analyze the difference and to spell all that out, again, with lots of nuance. But to realize that even as we're doing that, we're engaged in all of those levels. We're integrating indexical, iconic, and symbolic levels, into our discourse. Maybe one last example is try to think of a street light. The street light is out there and it's positioned someplace. Now, does it have all elements? I guess in some way you could say that it does have all. It would be sort of difficult. The index is, sometimes you have the street light and they have little blinders on the other side so that you can't really see when it's turning colors, for the other people here at the cross sections or at the cross intersections. When you're looking, the tendency for people is to, go when it's green, but maybe they're trying to anticipate when their other people are already getting, a red light. And the position of that really is an index. That is, they're trying to keep people from get access to that sign given where they specifically are in space and time. The actual colors, now that may be obviously symbolic. The order from going down to green, I don't know, that arguably that has an iconic value of as things go down, they get down to go. And, is that arbitrary? No, it could be arbitrary, but to realize that, the iconicity, I guess it could be there in terms of red being an icon for blood, or I guess it's somewhere, it's similar to, and it has a kind of similarity to it, which says stop. At any rate, I wanted to talk about index, icon, and symbol. I think to people who want to understand paradoxes, how paradoxes are created, and also if you want to get out of so much of the postmodernist nightmare, the relativist menace that has been ushered in, you really need to avoid the Saussurean model. Saussure was pretty interesting and useful for getting at linguistics. Was he really good for language as a whole and for communication as a whole? No, not really. You want to study the people like Roman Jakobson, particularly in the wonderful book that Elmar Holenstein put together, but then Charles Sanders Peirce. If more people could understand the index, icon, symbol distinction rather than the signifier signified, so many of our both problems in linguistics and in language and in communication would really just disappear. There'd be so much more forward movement if we could get out of this, again, the signifier signified, and really try to understand the degree to which all of reality, all of it, is comprised of index, icon, and symbol. Okay, thanks.